We encourage you to have a conversation in chat, make connections, talk to each other. But if you have any questions, it's probably preferable that you put them in the question and answer so that we can sort of keep track of them and make sure that we get those answered. And the last thing is that if we haven't started already, we are going to record this webinar. So it will be available and we'll send it out to everyone who registered at the end. All right, so let us get started. So I'm sure most of you know, that's why you're here, that we have the OER Course Development and Implementation Grant Program open right now. This is a grant program that's funded by federal GEAR funds, which were from the CARES Act, with the Coronavirus Education Act. There are two types of grants, both matching grants and both for public and independent institutions. So the idea is to either develop new OER or redesign OER for these three types of courses, either frequently transferred Texas core curriculum courses, co-requisite courses, or workforce courses within the workforce education course manual in high value fields. The website for the grant, where you can find application forms, the RFA that will explain the whole process and sort of the rules of the grant, is available at this website here, highered.texas.gov/OER-GEAR. And I think that Kate will probably put that in the chat for us if you don't mind. There are 3 rounds for this grant. So the round 1 deadline has already passed. That was November 17th. And we're aiming to announce awardees in early December for that one. But there are 2 other rounds. So the second round of applications is due December 15th. And then there's a 3rd round where the applications are due January 11th. So if you did not have a chance to submit an application in the first round, don't worry, there are 2 other rounds coming up. What are the eligible projects for this grant program? As I said, there are 2 different types of grants underneath this grant program: development grants and implementation grants. Development grants are the larger grants, up to $25,000, and they are for creating new OER for those 3 types of courses that we talked about. Institutional collaboration is required for these grants, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like later on. And then for this grant program, both projects are for online delivery for those 3 types of courses that we talked about. Implementation grants are for implementing existing OER, and the grants are up to $5,000. We encourage institutional collaboration for these grants, but it's not required. And again, this is for OER for online delivery for the Texas core curriculum courses, co-requisite courses, and workforce courses. For both types of grants, you can receive priority points if your course that you're working on is a high transfer Texas core curriculum course, either at the state level or the regional level, and or if it's a WECM course that leads to a high value credential. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means later on. And both types of grants should be matching. So the institution should provide a 1-to-1 match on the funds, either the up to $25,000 for the development grants and up to $5,000 for the implementation grant. We also have technical assistance partners that we're working with for these grants. So they're here to sort of provide guidance and help with the execution of these grant awards. So we basically have one partner for each type of course. We have OpenStax at Rice University is going to help out with the Texas core curriculum courses. The Dana Center at UT Austin will help out with the co-requisite courses, and Dallas College will help out with WECM courses. So they will be offering some informational webinars early January about the specific types of help that they'll offer awardees. And then they will, of course, be offering technical support to the grantees. I want to dive into the application. There are 4 elements of the application, and the application forms can be found, of course, on that website that I directed you to earlier, and we'll put that in chat again later. But 4 elements are the project narrative, the project work plan, the budget, and signatures. It's important that all 4 elements are included within your application when you submit it, including the signatures. That seems to be the thing that I have to send most applications back for, so make sure you have the correct signatures on there. And within the project narrative and project work plan, there are several sort of pieces that need to be present. So I'm going to walk through each element of the application and give some examples and some insight as to how that might be best completed. For the project narrative, it's important to identify sort of an overall goal for the project. That can be, based on your institution's strategic plan or whatever the case may be. But if your overall goal is saving students money, that's great. If your overall goal is, providing access on the first day, that's great. But you should have an overall goal for what you're trying to accomplish within this project. You should describe the course that you're applying for as it is currently, like what textbook is being used or other materials. Is it online, or everything I guess is online these days, but did you have to transition it online from face-to-face, or what is it like in its current state? There's a whole list of questions in section 8.2.2 of the RFA that includes questions about instructional design, questions about accessibility. Make sure that you answer all of those questions in your project narrative. If you hit all of those elements, then you will have a pretty strong project narrative, I think, going into the application. We are focused on instructional design of the courses for this project, for this grant program. So it's important to detail the ways that your project converting the course to using OER, how that would enhance the instructional design of the course. So think about assessments, think about student outcomes, think about how the materials that you're going to use are going to enhance your ability to reach those outcomes and assess those outcomes. You should have a plan for sustainability of the project. So what happens after the grant period ends? Are you going to work on getting more faculty to adopt these materials? Are you going to try and move to other courses as an institution and convert those to OER? What's your plan for sustainability of this project? You should describe the resources that are available at your institution. So if you're working with the library, if you're working with instructional designers, if you're working with your Office for Digital Learning, all of these things, describe what support the faculty who are sort of creating the materials or implementing materials have to do that. And especially for the development grants where it's required, you should describe what collaboration will be in place with another institution. And I'll give some examples about what that collaboration could look like in just a minute. And then you should detail the need for this particular project. So are you picking this course because it's high enrollment? Are you picking this course because you think that converting to OER could improve drop withdrawal rates? Why this course, why this project? And how are you going to move forward with that? As far as what the reviewers are looking for from the project narrative, they're giving points for a well-defined plan that aligns with the goals of the RFA. And the goals of the RFA are, as we stated earlier, to convert courses to OER for online in an online format. The reviewers will be looking for principles of instructional design and the quality of course materials. If you are perhaps if you're doing an implementation grant and you're going to be implementing existing materials and part of your plan is to sort of research what those materials might be, that's fine, but you should have a detailed plan as to where you're going to go to look for them, what sorts of materials you're looking for, how are you going to rate them, and that sort of thing. The project should be realistic within the grant period. The reviewers will be looking for that. So the grant period for this particular grant ends August 31st of 2023, or I'm sorry, 2022. And so you should be able to, use OER in the course and teach it twice within that grant period. And then sustainability, of course, we're looking for your plan for sustainability of this project. As far as collaboration goes, it can look like a few things. So it might look like a peer review of materials from faculty at a different institution. You might have partnerships for implementing the materials that you develop at a different institution for the same course. You might be seeking out library or other experts at another institution that can help you. Perhaps you form a partnership with an institution that already has an OER program that's very advanced and you want to learn from their librarians or their instructional designers. Professional development from another institution is a possibility, and those are not the only possibilities. Those are just some examples, but I think we encourage you to get creative and think about the ways that you can partner with other institutions to really spread the benefits of the OER that you're using as much as possible. And also collaboration can be within one grant. So there can be an institution applying for one $25,000 grant and sort of spreading the love amongst a few institutions with those types of collaborations. Or you can form consortial partnerships of up to 5 institutions where each institution would apply for a development grant of up to $25,000. Each institution would have to match that grant, of course, and then you would have to detail the plans for collaboration and how you would work to scale the use of that OER over those 5 institutions, or up to 5 institutions, I should say. Okay, so those are possibilities for collaboration. And we'll go into the project work plan. So the project work plan is really about outcomes and objectives. So you're going to sort of identify the overall expected outcomes, and then you're going to give us some objectives that are specific and measurable, and also a plan for how you're going to collect that data to measure whether or not you're hitting your outcomes. So the reviewers are going to be looking for the detail of your evaluation plan, whether or not they can sort of follow along and understand your specific plan for how you're going to evaluate these outcomes. Are the outcomes achievable given the resources and staffing that your institution is providing for this project? And will the project have a significant impact on the cost of educational resources for the course? So it is required that the course the course that you are proposing become a fully OER course, and the materials should be provided to the student at no cost. So we're looking really at what were the cost of the materials before you converted this course to OER. What were students paying previously, and how much are we saving them? Some sample outcomes and objectives. Your outcomes are just sort of your overall goal of cost saving or increasing faculty adoption or improving student outcomes. So show an improvement in student outcomes might be one example of an outcome. And then your objectives should be the specific and measurable things, the data that you're going to collect to see whether or not your project is successful. So that would be dollars saved for the cost savings outcome, the number of faculty adopting the materials after they are created, the drop withdrawal rates within a course. So your objective might be to decrease student drop withdrawal rates and maintain or increase student grades in the course. You may even get a little bit more specific than that and give us some goals for how much those drop withdrawal rates would fall, or things like that. But it should be something that you can collect data on, and then you give us your plan for how you're going to do that and who at your institution is going to be responsible for that. And then there's the budget. So there are only a few prohibited expenses for this grant program. Basically, costs incurred prior to the grant program, foreign travel, and travel not consistent with the state of Texas guidelines. I don't think many of us are traveling that much right now, so those probably don't matter that much, but you can't ask for grant money to pay for professional development that you already have engaged in, that sort of thing. Nothing that was incurred prior to the beginning of the grant program, which would be when the notice of grant award is fully executed. As far as allowable expenses, that leaves a lot of things, but our idea is that we are looking for sort of using the grant for instructional design or managing the project, not to supplant faculty salaries as they are normally, but for stipends for the extra work that's being done, summer salaries, if you have any digital media production that's going on throughout the project, support for the library, or any other cost related to content development or implementation. So you, again, get creative. There are a lot of ways I think that you could, there are a lot of allowable expenses for this grant. Professional development would be one of them too. And also for this grant, there's a sort of bonus if you include undergraduate students within the project in a significant way, then you can add up to 10% more on your budget to help you include those students. So that could look like a lot of things. They might help create the materials. They might help evaluate materials. There are a lot of different ways that students could be included, but that does allow you, including them does allow you to add a little bit of extra funding on the budget. And of course, the budgets are matching. I'll say that one more time. It's a one-to-one match from the institution. So matching funds can look like additional stipends, but not regular faculty salary. Regular faculty salaries would not count as matching funds. If the institution was gonna give additional funds to the faculty member for additional work, that would count. Instructional design support, library support, technical support, these can all be in kind. So things that the institution is doing to support the project, staffing that's being used to support the project, equipment or time, digital media equipment, professional development time, that sort of thing. And again, these are not the only possibilities, but these are some possibilities of how the institution might match funds. There are a couple of priorities for this grant program where you can earn an additional 5 priority points. So you can earn an additional 5 priority points if you are working on Texas core curriculum courses that are high transfer within the state or region. There is a list on the website along with the RFA and application forms that lists the 50 highest transfer TCC courses in the state. So that is one way to figure out if it's a high transfer course. If you're going for a high transfer course within your region, then you're going to have to explain within your project narrative a little bit about how you chose that particular course and what data proves that it's high transfer within your region. The same thing for the WECM courses that lead to high value credentials. We're not defining what a high value credential is. I think that's a very, very regional thing. So you, within your application, would explain to us how you decided upon a particular course and how that leads to a credential that's high value within your region. And again, for either of those two, you can receive 5 priority points if you do that. There should be a lot of support on your campus for this. So it's not, we're obviously offering, our technical assistance partners, we're offering these webinars. We're here to answer questions and all of that, and we're happy to help out during the application process. But there's also support on campuses. Some campuses have an OER office or a task force for the school or system or region. Some campuses have a particular position that's devoted to OER, whether that be in the library or student affairs, or it could be in a number of places. So I would take a look at that. Librarians are always very helpful. If you have an OER librarian, that's amazing, but I think librarians in general have really been a great source of support for faculty who are trying to work with converting their courses to OER, so that's a good place to look for help. Your digital learning office might be able to help with, especially because these are grants for OER that is available online. So I would look there. Instructional designers can help with that piece. Again, we're really putting emphasis on instructional design and making sure that these courses are well designed. And your Center for Faculty Development obviously is a good place to look for help too. But again, we are offering support as well, as much as we possibly can for you as you go through this process. So the beginning of January 4th and 5th, we will have webinars with our technical assistance partners, those 3 organizations or those 3 institutions I mentioned before: OpenStax at Rice, Dana Center at UT Austin, and Dallas College. We will be having additional webinars on a variety of topics, including the grant program, but also like OER basics, that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that. If you are not already signed up to get grant updates from the THECB website, I would do that. That's a good way to make sure that you're in the loop, but things will also be announced on our website. We're available to answer any questions. The grant email address is oer@highered.texas.gov. The OERTX repository, which was launched in September, is a good place for you to start looking for materials. It's a library of OER that is either used by faculty in Texas, developed by faculty in Texas, and really focuses a lot on those Texas core curriculum courses in particular. So I would start there looking for materials when you're thinking about using OER in your courses. And if you are interested in working with one of our technical assistance partners for the execution of a grant, should you be awarded one, then specify in your application sort of which of the technical assistance partners you think would be most useful to you, and then sort of what you would like some help with in the execution of the grant. What kind of technical assistance are you looking for? So these are all of the various websites and email addresses and places to get information. So the OERTX repositories, OERTX.highered.texas.gov. I'll show you the grant website in just a second, the OER Gear site where you can find the RFA and all of that. And then the OER at highered.texas.gov is where you can send your grant inquiries, and we'll answer those. And then my email address is there too. You're welcome to email me personally with any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the OER things that we do. And now really any of the digital learning things that we do at the coordinating board as much as I can be helpful. So I'm going to show you the website. I think you can all see my screen here, not just, and I can't of course get to when I want to get to, but let me try it this way. So on our website under institutional grant opportunities is the website for the grant program. Make sure that you're looking at the GEAR funded grant program and not the state funded grant program. And the direct URL that I gave you, the OER Gear URL, is the way to get to this page. It explains the grants a bit, the different types of courses that we're looking at, our technical partnerships, informational webinars. The information on our future webinars will be here. And then the RFA is here, application forms, and the list of most transferred courses, most transferred Texas core curriculum courses at the state level are there, as well as application deadlines for each of the rounds. So that'll give you all of the information that you need to apply, as well as the forms that you will need to submit an application. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think we have lots of questions. Like I see many flashing things on my screen. So I'm going to pull up the question and answer and start answering questions. Okay. Let's see. So I have a couple of questions actually about adjunct faculties. So one is, can adjunct contract pay be a match? And one is, can adjunct faculty be lead faculty member of a grant proposal? As far as adjunct faculty being a lead faculty member of a grant proposal, that is really up to your institution, because it is the institution for this grant program that is applying, that is the grantee who will receive the funds, and it is someone in upper administration who will sign that they are responsible for the grant funds. So that is a question for your institution, but I certainly, as far as our restrictions, we don't have any on adjunct faculty being on the team or anything like that. Can adjunct contract pay be a match? That is a very good question, and it may be one that I have to run by our legal counsel. I would say that because faculty salaries and adjunct faculty are faculty and their contract pay is their salary, that because faculty salaries can't be matched pay, that probably adjunct contract pay cannot be a match, but I will get a final answer on that if you want to email me, if anyone's interested. I don't know. Michelle, you look like you wanted to jump in, but no, you good? Okay. Okay.
No, I think we'll need to verify. If that is a question you specifically have, then if you can email us to the OER email address, that way we get you a definitive answer. But I think your logic is pretty much on point, Kyla.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Can upper level undergraduate courses, 3,000 and 4,000 level, or graduate courses qualify for this grant? So the answer is generally not, because we're focused on Texas core curriculum, co-requisite, and workforce education course manual courses. usually, certainly graduate level courses don't fall into that category. There have been cases of upper level undergraduate courses being within the Texas core curriculum, so I would check and see if the particular course you're thinking about is within the Texas core curriculum at your institution. And there's a website that we can try and get into the chat soon that is where you can check what courses are within the Texas core curriculum. So again, our courses at the Health Science Centers eligible. They would be eligible if they're within either Texas core curriculum or the Workforce Education Course Manual, which may not apply to many courses at the Health Science Centers, unfortunately, but I think some of them would. So yeah, as long as the course that you are applying for is within one of those three categories, core curriculum, co-requisite, or WECM, the Workforce Education Course Manual, then you should be good to go on that. Another question about adjunct faculty. I love it. Can adjunct faculty work on grants from multiple institutions? There's no restriction for you working on grants from multiple institutions. That's an interesting question. I think that you, from a self-care standpoint, should try not to spread yourself too thin, but I understand the, I think that would be an interesting way to collaborate too. But there's no restriction on adjuncts working on more than one grant, no. Do the collaborators need to be with an institution in Texas, or can they be in another state? So technically speaking, in the RFA, it does not specify that it needs to be an institution in Texas. That said, the goal is sort of to scale OER work across Texas. But if you make a good argument for why you want to collaborate with an institution in another state, perhaps they're experts in the type of OER that you want to work on, there's no restriction against that. Can the institutional support in cash and kind be higher than the funding amount requested? Certainly, yes, that's fine. That would be great. We love to see the institutions supporting the work. Would a subscription to repository hosting platform count in the allowable library support expense, as well as staffing for repository upload process, etc.? I want to say, well, okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is that it is required for all grantees of this program to put the resources that they either develop or find and adapt within the OERTX repository that was launched in September. So I'm not sure that a subscription to a repository hosting platform would be necessary, considering we're providing the repository hosting platform. As far as staffing goes, if you need library support to help with working with the repository and things like that, I think that could be counted as either an in-kind contribution or an allowable expense. Sure. Student involvement. Is the extra 10% in the budget for student involvement used to pay the students or cover the cost of their involvement? If the latter, what would be an example? And thank you. I think we would like to see the students benefit from the extra 10% that is budgeted for their involvement. If covering costs of their involvement, I don't really know what that would look like unless it would be to cover supplies they were using or something of that nature. But generally speaking, we're trying to involve students and then make sure that they receive the benefits of their work in that. Our university collaborator will contribute content and review the manual being developed. She will not use the manual at her institution, but will validate the credibility for transfer. Will her stipend come from our $25,000, or can she submit a budget under the allowable $25,000 for a partnering institution? I would probably need more details, but one of the requirements of the grant is that it's taught twice at the institution receiving the grant. So it's not only about developing or finding and adapting materials, but also about sort of implementing this at least for 2 terms. So if that condition was met, as well as the other conditions of the RFA, then that partnering institution could submit their own they submit their own application as a partnering institution, and you could form a consortium. But if it's sort of less than that, then you would probably do a lead institution submitting an application and spreading the love across to the other institutions. Does the course have to be fully delivered online? Yes. For this particular grant program, the materials have to be developed so that the course can be delivered online. I know that that looks like a lot of different things at different institutions, and there are different, you know, how much is online and how much is face-to-face and that sort of thing. The materials have to be able to deliver, have to be developed so that they can be delivered online. That doesn't mean that you can't, you know, use them for a course that is face-to-face in the future or something like that, adapt them, that sort of thing. But we are trying to come up with digital resources for this grant program. Can there be more than one application from the same institution for each grant type? Yes. So you are allowed as an institution to submit 1 development grant and 1 implementation grant per course. So an institution can submit for as many courses as you would like, but only 1 of each type of grant for that particular course. If we'd like to be a partner in a consortium application, we have to submit our own complete application in order to be a partner. Yes, that is true. You of course have to describe the consortium and the collaboration within the application, but you need to show us that as a partner institution, you are meeting the requirements of the grant program. So you would have to, we assume that your applications would look alike, right? But you would need to submit an application for your institution as a consortial partner. For implementation grants, must the OER text be identified as part of the proposal? Not necessarily. We understand that part of the grant process might be researching the OER that's available, and you know, the discovery process might be part of your grant process. That said, you should have a plan for where you're going to look for these materials, how you're going to judge these materials for quality. You should have parameters around your discovery process that should be described in detail in the application so that we understand that you have a good idea of how you're going to go about executing this. Does OpenStax provide technical editing assistance or online publishing support only? I know this will come up in January, but I'm wondering if this could be clarified sooner because we're hoping to submit before then. So the answer is both. technical editing assistance, and online publishing support. They will be able to give you more details in January, but they will be offering technical assistance both for editing and for publishing. Yes. Could you please talk more about how matching funds should or might be justified in the application? How would these funds be distinct from the funds requested in the original budget? So the request is what is for the extra fund, the funding that we would be providing you. The match should be what sort of supports is your institution providing this project? So that could be financial supports, they could be providing faculty stipends or something like that, or it could be in-kind supports like instructional design help or library help or something like that. Do you want to add to that, Michelle?
So it can also be, if you have consultation, like you said, with the digital learning group that you have, if you are, your Center for Faculty Development is going to create an OER community or community of practice to support some of the grant awardees within the institution. That can also be looked at as an avenue because you're growing, you're scaling, you're encouraging enthusiasm within a campus. So those types of things that are not directly, that you would think are directly related, can be attributed factors to progressing OER awareness on a campus. So those are just some examples.
Thanks. Yeah, I think really anything that your institution does to provide some support to this project and to, you know, the OER work that you're doing could be considered an in-kind contribution. So think big. For development grants, can cross-institutional collaboration be having multiple institutions in place that would adopt the material and provide evaluation, or all institutions must be involved in developing the course? No, I think what you've mentioned here is a really good example of cross-institutional collaboration, where perhaps one institution develops the materials and another institution does peer review, and then all institutions implement the materials, something like that. I think that's a really good example of what we're looking for. So yes, they don't necessarily have to be involved in developing the course, but there are lots of different ways that they could help make sure the materials are quality materials and are being implemented as widely as possible. What's the timeline for the earliest semester the new courses to be taught at the institution that receives the grant? So there's a timeline within the RFA that says that the grantee would be expected to have some materials, some draft of their materials uploaded to the OERTX repository by June of 2021, I believe. And then you would be required, the course should be taught after that, in two terms after that. So I guess the summer of 2021 would be the earliest we would expect, but also if there is some other timeline that makes sense for your project, propose that in your application. We can be flexible on the timeline, but that's sort of what we're imagining will happen. Consortia. I love it when y'all call me Dr. Tori. No, I'm kidding. Would it be useful to submit one consortial application for 1301 and a second consortial application for 1302 rather than one application for both courses? I think you could probably do either, whatever makes the most sense to you. Just make sure that you have sort of, that you detail in your application what you're doing for 1301, what you're doing for 1302. If it makes more sense to you to submit separate applications for the two courses, that's fine too. And yes, 1301 and 1302 are separate courses, so you could, it's technically 2 grants.
And just remember that it has to be matched on each application. So if you're submitting 2, that's 25,000 by the institution. So for a total of 50,000.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Very good point. What type of student involvement is acceptable? Can the students be recruited as lab assistants? We haven't put a lot of parameters on the type of student involvement because we would like to give you sort of the flexibility to do what is best for you. And I think, you know, lab assistants will probably make sense for some courses and not for others. So, so student involvement can look like a lot of things. Students can help you develop the materials. Students can help you implement the materials. They can review the materials. They, you know, so use your imaginations. And we're just really looking to help get students involved and excited about using OER and developing OER and all, and, you know, make them OER advocates on their campuses too. So, how many grants can a faculty member be attached to, either as a lead or a collaborator? There is not a limit. So as many as you think you can handle. Just that, so it is 1 grant per course. So as many courses as you think make sense for you is fine. For implementation, does it have to be for all courses being taught for that same subject or just 1 course? The applications are on a course-by-course basis. So you can implement 1 particular course, 1 grant per course. I get this question a lot. Can the course be taught face-to-face and online, but the OER is delivered online? Yes, so you don't just, because you're applying for 1 particular course does not mean that all sections of that course at your institution have to be taught online with the OER. You can implement the OER in some sections of the course, and of course, let your students know, mark the courses as such, but some of the sections could be face-to-face and some of them online using the OER, and that's totally fine. Does a lab course qualify? I think my expertise as to what a lab course would look like is going to fail me right now. So as long as it's a Texas core curriculum course, and you can go to the Texas core curriculum sort of dashboard and look up whether it's a TCC course at your institution. If it's on that list, then it would qualify. Yes. Same, and I guess the same would apply for the WECM courses. Does the partner institution have to develop the same course as us? Not even a course that is co-requisite. I'm not sure I understand that question. Maybe that if it's a co-requisite course at 1 institution and not a co-requisite course at another institution. If you're partnering with an institution, cross collaboration on an application, you're doing it for a course. So yes, I guess the partner institution should be developing the same course as you. How should individual applications that are part of a consortium application be marked or labeled during submission to help with grouping applications on your side? Or should all individual applications be included in the same submission? Thank you for thinking of us. I appreciate that. if it's possible to include them all in the same submission, that would be very helpful for us. Barring that, it should be pretty clearly described within your application that it is part of a consortium application. And one of the first pages of the application form has contact information for like your partner institutions on it. So just make sure that you include all of the institutions that you're working with on one application. Can two instructors from the same institution and department get paid for implementation? The idea is that you would work together. I guess if you're asking, so if it's for the same course, then you would need to work together in the same grant. One institution cannot put in two applications for the same course. So you could form a faculty team and apply for a grant sort of together, but you can't apply for two grants for the same course at the same institution. This grant is only for courses that are fully online, not for supplementing a face-to-face teaching. Can it be used to develop an OER lab course? Yes, for this particular grant, the materials developed should be developed for a course that is online. The materials should be available online, which is not to say that they can't be used to supplement face-to-face teaching at your institution, but it should be a course that is developed to be online. And again, with the lab course question, I think as long as it's within those three foci of our Texas Core Curriculum, Co-Requisite, and WECM courses, then it should be fine. Is there a minimum number of courses required to teach each semester? The course that you're applying for has to be taught twice using the materials. I mean, the idea is continuous improvement, right? We want to make sure that these materials are used and that you get some feedback and get some data and how the students feel about them and get some, how you feel about them when you're teaching with them and that sort of thing. So you need to teach twice with the materials. Well, your institution someone needs to teach twice with the materials. There's not a minimum. I mean, you need to teach the course that you're applying for twice. Yeah. If one of the collaborators is just reviewing the material, how do we allocate funds to them? In this case, we're not forming a consortia. What documents do you require? Then if you're just one lead institution and you're going to sort of subcontract with somebody at another institution, let's say, then you can just submit the one application as a lead institution and describe the sort of collaboration that you're going to be working with within your application. I would advise you to talk about the person that you are collaborating with, if it's one faculty member, their qualifications, describe why you have chosen this particular person or people. Is it okay if the collaborator is just a reviewer and not implementing it in their institution? Again, the implementation requirement is for if your institution is receiving the grant, then it needs to be implemented at your institution. So you can again sort of subcontract with someone at another institution for the review process, peer review, something like that. And they wouldn't need to implement it at their institution, but just make sure that you describe what that is going to look like very clearly in your application. Can we use the funding to pay student workers? I there are no, that is not prohibited within the RFA. So yes, especially the extra 10% if you include undergraduate students. I think that's the idea. So that'd be good. How many sections each semester? Again, there's no requirement within the RFA. I think it's just going to depend on your project, your institution, as long as it is taught over 2 terms, it meets the requirements. We're running out of time here. Goodness, I love all these questions. Would blended hybrid courses qualify for implementation grants if the OER materials are disseminated completely online, but the students also have some face-to-face component? That sounds fine. It is just that the OER materials should be available online. So that, I think that would meet the requirements. For clarity, is it okay for one institution to apply for several development and implementation grants in one combined application package, or do the grants need to be applied for individually? For review purposes, it would help a lot if you applied for each course individually. And I think it would be much simpler, honestly, for you to fill out that application form if you did one course at a time. June 2021 is the date the initial content must be uploaded into OERTX. I previously understood December 2021, so I wanted to verify. I think that you should not take my word on it when I said June 2021. I may have made up that. I didn't know that I made it up, but I may be misremembering that date. But the timeline for the grant is in the RFA. It's one of the appendices. So take a look there and it'll tell you, of course, the deadlines and everything for application, but also when deliverables are due and when reporting is due. Does the student 10% have to be matched by the institution? No, the student 10% is an added bonus on top of your, if you're using students, then you can add a 10% on your grant that doesn't need to be matched. And yes, I mean, if your grant is, if you're asking for $25,000, you can add an additional 10% on that to over $25,000 if you're involving students substantially. And when the collaborator is just a reviewer, can the letter of support be signed by the collaborator themselves, or do they need to get it signed from someone in the administration? I think if you're using reviewers at another institution, it probably makes sense to have the reviewer sign a letter. I'm pausing because I don't remember what the RFA says in that section. So that is a question that I would like you to please email me and I will get back to you. It may say in the RFA that it needs to be an administrator at the other institution. So if it does say that, then it would need to be an administrator at the other institution. Okay, last question, and last question is gone, and we're at 4 o'clock. So, all right. Well, thank you all very much, and please feel free to email me either at the OER@highered.texas.gov or at my personal address. We appreciate y'all being here, and we hope to see you at some upcoming webinars as well. And we look forward to your applications. So, thanks a lot.